Who were the men who revived true religion in England 100 years ago? What were their names, so we can honour them? Where were they born? How were they educated? What are the main facts of their lives? What was their special area of labour? I want to provide some answers to these questions in the present and future chapters. I feel sorry for the person who has no interest in such matters. The instruments used by God to do his work in the world deserve a close inspection. The person who would not care to look at the ram's horns that blew down Jericho, the hammer and nail that slew Sisera, the lamps and trumpets of Gideon, or the sling and stone of David, might reasonably be considered a cold and heartless person. I hope that all who read or listen to this book want to know something about the English evangelists of the 18th century. The first and foremost person whom I will name is the well-known George Whitefield. Though not the first in order, if we look at the date of his birth, I place him first in the order of merit, without any hesitation. Of all the spiritual heroes of 100 years ago, no one saw what the times demanded as soon as Whitefield, and none were so bold in the great work of spiritual aggression. I would think it would be an act of injustice if I placed any name before his. George Whitefield was born at Gloucester in the year 1714, the city where John Hooper preached and prayed, and the city where the zealous Miles Smith protested, was the place where the greatest preacher of the gospel that England has ever seen was born. Whitefield's early life, according to his own account, was anything but religious, although, like many boys, his conscience occasionally bothered him, and he experienced random fits of devout feeling. However, habits and general tendencies are the only true test of young people's characters. He confesses that he was addicted to lying, filthy talking, and foolish jesting, and that he was a Sabbath-breaker, a theatre-goer, a card-player, and a romance reader. All this, he says, went on until he was 15 years old. At the age of 15, Whitefield appears to have left school and to have given up Latin and Greek for a time. In all probability, his mother's difficult circumstances made it absolutely necessary for him to do something to assist her in business and to get his own living. Therefore, he began to help her in the daily work of the Bell Inn. At length, he says, I put on my blue apron, and I washed cups, cleaned rooms, and in one word became a professed common labourer for about a year and a half. This state of things, however, did not last long. His mother's business at the Bell Inn did not flourish, and she finally retired from it altogether. A former classmate revived in Whitefield's mind the idea of going to Oxford, and he went back to the grammar school and renewed his studies. Some friends recommended him for Pembroke College, Oxford, where the grammar school of Gloucester held 2 exhibitions. Eventually, after several providential circumstances had smoothed the way, he entered Oxford as a servitor at Pembroke at the age of 18. Whitefield's time at Oxford was the great turning point in his life. His journal explains that for 2 or 3 years before he went to the university, he had been having some religious convictions, but from the time he entered Pembroke College, these convictions quickly grew into definite Christianity. George Whitefield diligently attended all means of grace within his reach. He spent his spare time visiting the city prison, reading to the prisoners, and trying to do good. He became acquainted with the famous John Wesley and his brother Charles, and a little band of like-minded young men, including James Hervey, the well-known author of Theron and Aspasio. These were the devoted party to whom the name Methodists was first applied because of their strict method of living. At one time he seems to have greedily devoured such books as Castanuza's Spiritual Combat and writings by Thomas à Kempis, and he was in danger of becoming a semi-Roman Catholic, an ascetic, or a mystic, and of placing all of his religion in self-denial. He says in his journal, I always chose the worst sort of food. I fasted twice a week. My apparel was humble. I thought it unbecoming a penitent to have his hair powdered. I wore woolen gloves, a patched gown, and dirty shoes. And though I was convinced that the kingdom of God did not consist in meat and drink, yet I resolutely persisted in these voluntary acts of self-denial,